I think Trump could be really good for crypto and at the same time completely ruin the global economy. On this week's episode, I'm joined by my friend Ryan King, who is a chartered accountant, social media content creator, and founder of the online education platform Making Money Simple.
I've been investing into it monthly for 4 or 5 years now. I read a few books. So 3 really good books is...
Why do you think it's so important that people understand investing and that they essentially start investing?
I guess you can do 3 things with your money.
You have a blueprint.
Yeah, so this is...
Where do we start?
So...
Over the last few years, Ryan has grown his investment portfolio from 0 to over 100 grand. Forget about all this, just tell me what to do.
Yeah, people spend like a lot of money on crap, essentially, and then all these flashy stuff, whereas you could spend on something that actually matters.
I'm victim number 1. How is it that you started on your financial journey?
Yeah, so I actually accidentally... people were scared to invest because the market is like at a high. Since I've been investing now for 7 years, the whole first year I was actually in the red.
Explain compounding returns to someone that had never heard of it.
Yeah, so honestly, that's the largest section of the book. It's 31 pages because I think it's like the most misunderstood and overcomplicated investing concept.
So this week, we're going to be talking all things investing. We'll be discussing how to get started, why you should invest, different assets to invest in, managing risk, and yes, we're going to talk about Donald Trump and crypto. Welcome, Ryan.
Hello, Niaz. It's great to be here. Thank you for the introduction. Good to be
Finally
back.
got there. Yeah, how's it been? How's it been being back in London? Because you have come back from Australia.
Yeah, come back from down under, across the pond. Quick 24-hour flight.
Oh.
But no, it's good. Come back for a couple of weeks, doing a bit of work, doing a few podcasts, helping push the new book. But no, it's good to be back, to be fair. In Australia, Christmas is boiling, obviously.
Yeah.
Feels very un-Christmassy.
Yeah.
And I do actually love Christmas. So it's good, even though it's not Christmas yet, it's good to be back.
Are you going to stay for... You're not going to stay for Christmas?
Nah. I came back last year for Christmas, but this year I'm going to do Christmas in Melbourne.
What's that like, Christmas on the beach?
It is weird.
Is
It's
it?
like 30 odd degrees. It doesn't feel Christmassy.
Really?
There's like no lights, well, we'll put some songs on, but yeah, it's not the same. It's
But
better
there is like Santa outfits, but on the beach.
There is still stuff, to be fair, but it just doesn't, it's not quite the same as being in like London, finishing work, going for a few pints, being freezing, going back home, getting in the warm. But no, it's good. Different, but good.
But you get in Australia, you get the month off, right?
Yeah, actually,
Generally.
a lot of offices shut down.
Yeah.
Yeah, so mine does shut down for like 2 weeks. You have got to take annual leave, which is a little bit annoying, but mine shuts down for a couple of weeks. And then a lot of the big dogs will like take like, the whole month off and just go to their like beach house down the beach or go away with their family. But yeah, this year I'll be having a bit of time off and just staying in Melbourne, probably doing some content, making money simple.
Get around to it finally. So the law firm that I work at is a merger with an Australian firm. So we work a lot with our Australian colleagues, and they just from December.
See you later.
Or is it all of January pretty much done? Like
Yeah.
Summer basically.
Yeah.
The office shuts down.
That's the thing as well. It's like peak summer as well. So that's why actually the office shutdown isn't the worst thing in the world.
Yeah.
Because it is
Peak
like
of summer.
So you can go away, can go down to the beach, can do something.
What's it like?
In Australia?
Yeah, in
Or
peak summer, like it's just
it
so
is
much
like-
to do.
There's a lot to do. It does get proper hot, to be fair. And
Really?
the UV is pretty mad over there. I'm constantly getting burned. So you do need to probably put
I'll tell you what, one thing I have noticed is that you didn't get a tan.
I don't tan.
After-
White, red, white.
Oh my gosh.
But that is good over there, to be fair. It's good, yeah. Bit different to being in the UK. Been there for 2 years now. Probably another year or 2 and then come back eventually, but enjoying it whilst I'm there.
No, I'm glad. I'm happy for you, man. It's been nice to see from this side what you've been conquering on that side of the world as well.
Yeah, putting a few stories up, trying to make some people jealous.
Yeah. So we've been friends for a few years. We initially connected over launching Millennial Money and you launching Making Money Simple.
Yeah.
It's crazy to see how they've developed, right?
Yeah, it's
It
mental.
was just like a fun thing that everyone used to do. Like the community was much smaller.
Yeah.
And seeing how it's like grown is incredible. And obviously now seeing you release a book as well.
Yeah.
Which, by the way, is an incredible read.
Yeah.
I told
Thank
you,
you.
I delayed this podcast because I told you I wanted to digest the book.
Yeah.
So I have actually read most of it.
No, thank you for reading it. Yeah, it's pretty mad because I started Making Money Simple at the start of 2019.
Yeah.
Originally just posting, probably a bit like you, to be fair, just like little graphics of like
exactly.
personal finance and investing tips.
Yeah.
And then, obviously now like nearly 6 years later, like you've got this mad podcast, I've got a book.
It's
Yeah.
crazy.
And now there were so few of us in the start, and now there's like loads and loads of people,
Yeah,
and
which
it's just
is
grown
amazing,
massively. Yeah, so good.
And it's like more. So funny enough, actually, I was in the office today. I'm not joking. This happened. This was on my desk because obviously I was making notes on it as well. And someone sat behind me, walked past, going, "Oh, that's that guy Ryan."
No.
I swear.
That is mental.
if I'm lying, I'm dying. I swear. And then he goes, oh yeah, he, which we'll get onto. Oh, he loves global index funds.
Oh,
Doesn't
there you go.
he? That's exactly.
That's what.
And I was like, that's my mate. I'm actually interviewing him after work.
Oh, that's mental. That's a coincidence, especially today. That's what everyone says though.
Yeah.
Whenever they're like, oh, global index funds.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's all I'm into.
Well, that's what you highlight a lot, which I think is good.
That's the main bulk of my portfolio, as we'll get into.
Yeah, but I thought a good place to start is how is it that you started on your financial journey?
Yeah, so I actually accidentally got started in August 2017. I was doing a placement year of working in London for a year in between my second and third year of uni, and I got auto-enrolled into a workplace pension. And I didn't even know for a good year that, and a lot of people still don't know, if you have a workplace pension, that is your money and you're an investor and it'll be invested into something. So you need to get access to it as soon as possible, see what the money's going into, see how much you got, see what fees you're paying. But during that same year of sort of working in London, I was living at home on trains a lot, the tube, and I just read loads and loads of books on personal finance and investing. And it was actually then probably August 2018, mid 2018, when I properly sort of actively off my own back started investing.
Yeah.
Opened up a stock and shares ISA, made a load of mistakes at the start. And then really, probably since actually August 2018, just always been into investing. And it was probably actually in like mid 2019 when I sort of finally got my approach nailed down of just global index funds and ETFs.
Yeah.
And that's literally the only thing when it comes to the stock market anyway, in my like pensions and ISAs, the only thing I invest into. And it's been then like over 5 years now, just contributing to those every single month, and in total 7 years of investing, which is mental because it feels like I started just like a few months ago.
Yeah, it's crazy.
It's been like dozens and dozens of months now of just contributing every single month.
But it's that slow and steady that actually means that you can amass quite a bit of wealth.
Yeah.
And you started, unlike me and Shaq, you started quite young and like you were smart about it. My way around to it was I made tons of all the mistakes beforehand. And I was like, oh my god, I need to sort this out.
Yeah.
But I remember because you started very early on. And
Yeah.
you started ingraining a lot of those habits very early on. And you have to give yourself room to experiment and make some mistakes.
Yeah, definitely.
And learn from them, because otherwise you don't know what your own, I guess, appetite is.
Yeah. No, I did still make so in the first few months when I properly actually started investing off my own back and not just accidentally through the workplace pension, I initially opened up a investing account on a high street bank because I didn't realize you could use an investing platform like Vanguard, Trade 212, Hargreaves Lansdowne, whoever. I then opened up a general investment account rather than a pension or an ISA. So general investment accounts have no tax advantages. I then started investing into high fee active funds. Now it's like low cost. Essentially everything I did, I now do the opposite.
Yeah.
I also similarly like dabbled with like individual stocks, reading
I
tips
remember.
online,
I remember
all of that stuff.
You gave me a few bad tips.
That's why I got no money.
But before we get lost into the whole, like, there's so much, again, I think me and you just before off camera, we were saying how when you're in this space and you talk about investing, you assume everyone understands at a basic level what we're talking about. But actually, I put out a call out on our Instagram and asked for questions. And bar none, the most common question, which I think is a lesson to us to completely strip it back, was like, where do we get started?
Yeah.
Right? We assume that people understand what general investment accounts are, but actually the main question for everyone is, where do we get started? How do we get started? Most people actually have no idea. The concept of investing scares them. They associate it with losing money and like trading, etc. Right?
Yeah.
So I think your book quite helpfully as well, and similarly we'll do it in this podcast, and we'll try and do it in a way that we explain some concepts, we'll try and get our take on things, but also try and make it actionable for people as well. And your book is really helpfully split into 3 parts, which looks at trying to give everyone the foundational understanding of investing and why it might be important. And then you look at giving them a lot of the information about the investment world effectively, and understanding assets and compounding and other very important themes. But then actually a very simple, actionable blueprint.
Yeah, which I think is the most helpful bit of the book.
Yeah.
I think you need to read the first 2 parts to get to the third part, sort of understand it.
Yeah.
But then it really is that sort of blueprint. They are the steps to actually practically start.
I take myself back to before I understood investing, right? And because I didn't understand things, but I wanted to make money, I remember I used to say to people that I assumed understood investing, I was like, forget about all this, just tell me what to do.
Yeah,
do you know
that's
what I
the
mean?
common.
And like if I was like that, I know most people are probably like that to it. And I would have considered myself relatively financially literate at that point in my life, relatively. But I was literally like, oh, I don't care, just tell me what to do. I'll just put it in. And it makes you think. I think it's important that you structured your book in that way. And I think at the same time, it's really good that you have that. By the way, and just do this.
Yeah. I'll give you all the information, but then also, if you want the simplest possible route, just do X, Y, Z.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I do agree with you. I think there are quite a few barriers to entry. I think people obviously just want to know what to invest into and like what fund or what stock is going to give the best return. In reality, it's impossible to know that ahead of time.
Yeah.
So my sort of approach, as we can go through, is just a sort of low risk way of investing over the long term. Of course, investing carries some risk, but if you believe the sort of like world and global economy is going to become like more productive, more innovative, and keep growing as companies become better, then you can invest and then grow your wealth alongside that.
All right. Let's get going then. Well, I like the urgency of this title.
Yeah.
Stop waiting, start investing. It's so simple. To be fair, you've always been that straight talking.
Yeah.
Try
and keep it simple.
I think that's what it is. Being a Hertfordshire boy, isn't it? So, why do you think it's so important that people understand investing and that they essentially start investing?
I think, so I guess you can do three things with your money. You can spend it, but once you spend it, it's obviously gone. You can save it, which is quite a common thing to do, particularly in the UK. I feel like maybe the US have a bit more of an investing mindset. But in the UK, it's very much like save, which is great. You do need to save for stuff, and saving is a very good skill to build. But the problem is, over the long term, those savings will lose out due to inflation. So if you had £1,000 saved 10 years ago, what you can actually buy now, like going down the shop, pair of trainers, whatever it is, will be a lot less, and that's only going to get less and less over time because of inflation. So the third option is then investing to actually essentially put your money to work to let it grow over time and compound. And I guess like, what's the point of doing that? Well, hopefully it can grow to a point where you can actually live off of your investment pot. But even if you can't contribute that much or you're starting later in life, it's still very much worth doing, because even if you can build a small pot, you can still maybe part retire earlier, live off that pot, pass it down to other generations, give it back to people. So of course, don't get me wrong, if you can start early, it's going to massively benefit you, but you can still start late.
Yeah.
Might be a smaller pot, might be less, but it's still better than nothing. But yeah, I see investing as sort of putting your money to work. And of course, there's loads of asset classes. In the book, I talk about the stock market specifically to then grow your wealth slowly over time. And being in the UK, as we're going to get into, when you've got pensions and stocks and shares ISAs, they're great ways to tax efficiently build your wealth over the long term whilst you're working, traveling, living life, doing whatever you want, but then got this little big pot of gold in the background ticking over each year.
Yeah, absolutely. And actually, a good practical way to look at that, which I have been like framing it in recent years, is you can be rich, right? You can have a high income and have loads of money and be quite rich, but that's different to being wealthy, right? And so, for example, you've got a portfolio which is in excess of 100 grand now, which is amazing, right? I know people who are quite rich in their lives and lifestyles who earn.
They might earn that in a year.
Yeah. So they earn. They do. So they earn in excess of 6 figures in a year.
Yeah.
They don't have 100 grand.
Yeah.
Right. So these people have very rich lifestyles. People I know, people in my workplace, right, who actually earn like.
Shots fired.
No. But no, it's true. You know, it's common for the legal sector, and actually it's common in finance. It's common in corporate London, let's say.
100%
right?
in London. Yeah.
So where you get multiple 6-figure salaries. And I know for a fact that a load of people who are earning those salaries in our sectors don't have 6 figures in saved or invested, right? And that's the point, because I think wealth is much more long term.
Yeah.
And a lot of the time it is accumulated over generations. That's the other thing. Okay. Well, obviously we invest. We make investment decisions to, I guess, speed that process up. But the truth is as well, wealth, like you said, a lot of the time is inherited. Yeah. So, but that again is years and years and decades and lifetimes of people making investment decisions so that it could be passed down, right?
Yeah.
No one earns like their way to generational wealth. Some people might be working at Nvidia, but it's rare, right?
Yeah.
So that's the thing. Like, investing is your route for me, and I say it like the way I sort of stick my pole out is that investing and making good, smart investment decisions is your route to wealth.
Yeah.
But you can live a rich life when you're tethered to a high income, but that rich life will disappear when you lose that income.
It doesn't translate to wealth necessarily.
Exactly.
Yeah. It's often, you always see these stats where even like these ridiculously high earners essentially live paycheck to paycheck and don't really invest anything because they got to keep up this rich, luxurious lifestyle. And then you earn all this money and have nothing to show for it, which is why even on smaller salaries, I mean, even when I first started on my grad scheme in London years and years ago, I still invested a small amount, but still put a portion aside. And to what you were saying, I think there's this good quote where it's like, being rich is loud, but then being wealthy is quiet. So you might see someone being rich, all these expensive dinners, flashy cars, but then someone might have wealth who like isn't working. He's got time freedom, location freedom. You wouldn't even know, but then he's so much wealthier than the person who's rich, if that makes sense. Yeah,
absolutely, man. And especially if you're in a big city like London and like all these other places where it's possible to earn these high incomes, right? People oftentimes are like oscillating between the two. Oh, should I accumulate my wealth? That requires a lot of patience and discipline.
100%.
So basically, when you're investing, you're saving towards your future, right? Towards your future.
Delayed gratification. 100%. Like literally the pinnacle of delayed gratification is investing.
Exactly. But then to experience your riches now and make it very visible, you're taking away from the future. So I think that there's quite a distinction there.
It is like a balancing act as well. So even though I have been, speaking for myself, been like building my wealth by putting away 25% of my income every month, I'll still like go on nights out, go on holidays. You got to do both. But I think what you're sort of alluding to is like people spend like a lot of money on crap essentially, and then all these flashy stuff. Whereas you could spend on something that actually matters and makes you happy, or even invested it. And those two things do so much more for you than just living this sort of like rich luxurious lifestyle.
I'm victim number one. Like I constantly oscillate between the two sometimes when I come into money, and obviously
it's difficult.
It is, and I have to check myself sometimes because I'm like, wait, I'm like.
Do I need this?
And I've always been open about not being naturally frugal, and I find it so easy to spend. I'm like, I like this now. I can afford it. Like, might as well go for it. But it takes a greater level of self-love and discipline to be like, yes, I will enjoy this, but I'm going to take some enjoyment and deposit it for my future as well. Yeah. Which I think is investment is the exercise to do that, right?
Literally, yeah. It's literally like delayed gratification in a nutshell. And then if you are able to do that consistently, month after month, while still treating yourself, then hopefully in the end you can retire a bit earlier, pass it down to children or grandchildren, give it back to whoever you want. And that's really the benefit of just investing and having this sort of delayed gratification long-term mindset.
The other thing that people reached out to us, and it was a common query, and I want to touch on something that you said as well, is people think you have to reach a level of wealth or income to start investing. And one thing that you really like was great that you touched on was that actually start slow and steady, what you can afford, and start putting that away, because the big thing is actually it's not necessarily the amount, it's the behavior, especially early on. And I think that's something that you did really well, is that you said from the start, I'm putting this much into this fund, I'm investing this much into these assets, and I'm going to just slice that off, and as my salary increases, I'm going to do that in a proportionate way and just put that aside. And that behavior was instilled in you, I remember, so early on.
Habit.
And
that's why it's really good actually starting small, because when I actually properly started investing with my Vanguard stocks and shares ISA, it was about £100 a month. So it's still a decent chunk of money, nothing obviously like life changing, but it's still a decent chunk. And I think by starting small and making those mistakes with like smaller amounts of money actually benefit to me, because I was at the same time, as you said, building the sort of mindset, because most investing is really psychological. There's a really good book called The Psychology of Money, one of the best books.
Morgan Housel. I quote him often.
Same publisher as that one.
Wow.
I know. Hopefully it also sells 8 million copies. But
you can fly me to Australia and then we'll do a podcast there.
100% I'll do that if that gets to 8 million. I can probably buy a private jet if it gets to 8 million. But yeah, that's a quality book, and it's all sort of like just literally how money and investing is just a mental game. So I think if you can start small, of course, if you can start with more money, you can build your pot quicker. But there are definitely benefits of starting small, because you can sort of learn how volatile the market is, build that good habit and behavior while still educating yourself, and really understand that investing and really all of money is just like a mental game.
It's
all
actually
just psychology.
It's a soft skill. Like money management is actually a soft skill. And
it's more often what you don't do rather than what you do. When everyone's panicking, you sell, then the market bounces up, you've lost thousands, and then so often what you just, there's a really good quote by Jack Bogle, the founder of Vanguard, where it's like, don't do anything, just stand there. When everyone's going mad, boom, bust, crashing, just don't do anything. Just keep automatically contributing
Yeah.
and just let it ride for the long term.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I completely agree.
But no, I do agree with you that, building that habit is so key. And that's why if you can, and nowadays as well, investing, a very common myth that you touched on is it's as accessible and as easy as ever. There's so many investing platforms where you can start with just a few quid. You don't need, I think maybe in decades gone by, you would need thousands of pounds to start investing. But now, and how do you actually start? Just get an app, get a platform. We can go into that app, website, open an account, start with a few quid, and you are an investor.
Yeah.
And often that like first step of doing that is like the most difficult bit. And then once you've done that, you then got your sort of toes wet, and then you can keep the ball rolling from there.
100%. I think back to like my first few years of investing, and I learned all of it by just doing and trying and like making the mistakes as well.
It's got to be done. It's like the gym as well. It's like you can design all this perfect
100%
routine,
and then paralyze yourself.
Take all these supplements and do all this, and then if you don't go to the gym, you're not going to make any gains.
Yeah.
And it's actually the same, different type of gains with like investing in money. If you don't actually make the first step and invest that first pound, you're not going to make any gains.
Yeah, it's funny because Morgan actually talks about in that book, there are two things that you can't really cheat. That's your personal health and your relationship with your money and how you manage your money.
Yeah.
They're actually more similar than you realize because there's such behavioral factors involved.
Yeah.
And just quickly, how old are you now?
27.
27, and you've accumulated an investment pot of over 100 grand. And the reason I say that is because, first of all, like, amazing.
No,
but the way you've done that is, so like you said, putting like 100 quid away.
Yeah, because I've not like done anything special. I'm not a genius. I'm a very average bloke.
Yeah.
I'm not inherited anything. It's just being consistent.
And it's not been, oh my God, I've made 50 grand here, I'm going to put 50 grand into it. It's not been those high, it's literally just been slow and steady.
Yeah.
And let it grow.
Yeah, I actually made a TikTok on this today. But literally, and it's probably like a boring TikTok to watch, but it's just the fact of most of my sort of like investing wealth, if you want to call it that, my investment pot has literally just come from working a 9 to 5, increasing my income over time. Particularly when I qualified as a chartered accountant back in 2021, I got a big salary jump, and then continued to increase my income, continuing to avoid lifestyle inflation, investing more and more, making additional income from side hustles, making money simple, whatever it is, and then really just increase income, invest more, increase income, invest more, do that for 7 years. And now all of a sudden, yeah, it's mental to say I've got like, it doesn't really feel any different.
Yeah,
I don't feel any different. I've got like 100 odd K, but yeah, it's just doing those basic things. And then all of a sudden, it seems pointless at the start. Don't get me wrong. I know the first early years, like 100 quid here and there, then your pot gets to £1,000, then it's a few £1,000. It all does seem pointless.
Yeah.
But then all of a sudden you sort of fast forward, in my case, 7 years, you might do it quicker, slower. It doesn't really matter, but you zoom out over like the longer term and you're like, oh, all of those little contributions, all that compounding, it was all worth it.
I want to come back to that because that ability to zoom out sums up how to be a good investor effectively. Literally that ability to zoom out.
If in doubt, zoom out.
Exactly. If in doubt, zoom out. Is that yours?
It wasn't me, but I've used it a few times. I can claim it, to be fair.
Is true. If in doubt, zoom out. I'm taking that as well.
Actually, I've also got another like little video that I made where it's people are scared to invest because the market is like at a high, whatever that means, because the market is always high. And looking at my own investment portfolio of the main global fund I invest into on Vanguard, when I started in 2018, it was at an all-time high. At 2019, it was an all-time high. At 2021, it was an all-time high.
Yeah.
Now it's at an all-time high.
Yeah.
So imagine if I didn't start because the market was high.
Yeah.
And now all of a sudden it's just gone up in a vertical line. And all these, I mean, since I've been investing now for 7 years, the whole first year I was actually in the red because it was like a little tech crash. Yeah. There was then obviously the big COVID 30% crash. There's then been like modern high interest rates, modern high inflation. Yeah. There's been wars, elections, mad stuff going on in the world. Yeah. And yet the stock market still goes up. It shows obviously the disconnect between what's called like Wall Street and Main Street, between like investing and the real world. Yeah. And it's always disconnects. But just by starting investing and then staying invested, I've just sort of participated in that and grown my wealth alongside it. So don't like, just because the market's high, be scared to just start whenever you can, wherever you can afford, and just be consistent. And that's sort of the main message of what I try to get across.
And think long term.
And then think long term,
Okay.
This is by zooming out. So that's the point I was trying to make there. Sorry. So like once I then zoom out 7 years, each individual year I've been investing, the market is at a high. It looks like a bad time to invest. Then you zoom out, and it's like, wow, it's gone almost straight up. All those little crashes seem like nothing.
We'll come back to that because I need you to remind me of that when we talk about crypto.
Yeah.
Just to get going, what do you think are the necessary foundations to have when it comes to investing?
Yeah, so I think with investing, you sort of need to probably, it's sort of some stuff we've already talked about, to be fair. You got to understand that you're sort of giving some money up today to then hopefully build some wealth over the long term. You've got to try and build that sort of mental psychology, investor's mindset, to actually not get sucked in to this sort of fear and greed. Because often the news is quite clickbaity, fear mongering, and don't get sucked into that. And it's really then just putting away what you can afford each month and then being consistent with it over the long term. I'll tell you, if you can get all of that stuff, and it's all quite basic stuff people know what to do. And that's why I actually say in the book at the start, like, investing is simple, but it's not easy. Because doing all of those things in practice is difficult. But you can sort of stick to that, then over the long term, you're only going to build your wealth.
Yeah, I think that's a really good summary. There's other principles that obviously there's so much that we can go into that we probably wouldn't cover off in an hour and a half. But by way of like quick concepts that I think are important for people to understand. Yeah. Also, I still don't. I've been in the personal finance space as a commentator of sorts for
an expert.
Years. Yeah, a mistake maker for a few years. Or good few years, almost half a decade now.
Yeah, it's mad.
Over half a decade.
Testimonial soon.
Yeah, come on. I don't know if this quote is true, but we used to post it. I think you posted it about compounding being the sixth wonder of the world, and Einstein saying
the eighth wonder of the world.
Eighth wonder of the world.
Yeah,
yeah. And Einstein used.
I think Einstein said it originally. Yeah.
But whether he did or not,
blast that.
Yeah, whether he did.
Einstein's picture, put that on there. Yeah, 100 likes.
But how would you explain compounding returns to someone that had never heard of it before?
Yeah, so honestly, that's the largest section of the book. It's 31 pages, because I think it's like the most misunderstood and overcomplicated investing concept, but it probably is the most important.
Yeah,
because over the long term,
yeah,
and we can talk about using the compound interest calculator in a sec, remind me, just so people can sort of work out how much they might end up with. But over the long term, most of your sort of wealth or your investment pot will come from compound interest. So all it is essentially when you earn interest on interest, or really in investing terms, when you earn a gain or return on a previous gain or return.
Yeah.
So if you invest 100 quid and you make 10%, £10, you could withdraw that money, but then you're not giving it a chance to compound. By leaving that invested, if you then go on the next year to make another 5% return, 20% return, you're making that on the original £100 and the £10 you made from the first year.
Yeah.
And by doing that consistently, as you're then chucking in more money, hopefully, and generally speaking as well, the stock market, although it's sort of it does boom and bust, over the long term, the after inflation rate of return is about 7%. So as you sort of keep adding money to the pot or fuel to the fire, you're getting these gains. It's going to crash, of course, but you're getting these gains. Leaving those previous gains invested, they then go on to make more and more gains as you're adding more money, and that's where this sort of snowball effect of compounding. And I go through loads of examples, and you can use a compound interest calculator to try and work it out, but it's simply just where your sort of previous gains, by leaving them invested, they're then still working in the markets and going on to make more gains. And it's also worth saying as well, if you're investing and earning dividends, then if you leave that gain invested, you've got a bigger pot, that's more dividends, they get reinvested.
It's growth on
and
growth.
It's all,
growth on growth. And exponential growth, right?
It does become exponential.
Yeah, it's exponential growth. And I'm glad you made a distinction between compounding returns and compound interest. Because I think a lot of people, because compound interest is like, oh, let's hear compound.
Yeah.
But like, obviously there is a slight difference. Some people avoid interest and some people go straight for investment returns. But it's the same concept, right? And it's growth on top of growth.
Yeah, that's
which eventually, but like to visualize it, because I know when people talk about this stuff, and
it's different.
Remember, we have to completely bring ourselves back and think about how the audience might want to understand this. And a snowball is a perfect example. It is the right? Example. Rolling a snowball down the hill as it gathers snow, and then the snow that it's gathered has gathered more snow, and then suddenly it just becomes a massive ball.
Unstoppable.
Exactly. Yeah. And that's effectively what happens with your money. Same with, you said, I think, throwing like wood into a fire, or like, so as the blaze is growing, it's still growing off like the original stuff that you put in, and it just keeps growing and growing and growing. It's the same. It's things that become like unstoppable forces effectively over a period of time as more is added in, but the original is still there, and then it keeps growing exponentially.
And one really good thing people can do is, and I always recommend this to people, is use a compound interest calculator. So if you Google that, there's loads. I use one called the calculator site, but you can essentially, the main three inputs to work out how much you could end up with over the long term is your own contributions, the rate of return, and then the years. So the time you're invested. So your own contributions, you can obviously put in wherever you want, but just say you can invest 100 quid a month. Start with that. the return, I always use 7%.
Yeah.
That's a sort of after inflation rate of return. A lot of people use 10%, which is pre-inflation, but after inflation, because that erodes the value of our money, 7% is a bit more accurate. But then the years is where it gets good, because you put in 10 years and you'll see that the pot's growing, but most of it's your contribution.
Yeah.
After 20 years, compound interest starts taking over. After then 40, 50 years, you see that most of your return is due to compound interest. And that really is the power of it over the long term. It is one of those things where it literally, as I said, patience, delayed
100%.
gratification, which is why it's hard to
100%.
actually see it.
Yeah.
But even now, myself, like I can see now I've got a 6-figure pot. When there is like a good year in the markets, like the last 12 months, it adds so much to the pot.
100%.
And by leaving that invested, there could be a crash, don't get me wrong, but if it keeps doing this, then it's only going to make more gains and gains and gains on the previous gains, and that's sort of then how it just gets out of hand. And then ultimately, well, one day you can then live off of the money, or at least let it sort of fund part of your lifestyle. And that's really the aim for me.
Yeah, 100%.
Hopefully that helps to break down compound interest a bit.
No, it does. I think
it is confusing and hard to get your head around, but that's sort of the theory. And if you can use a compound interest calculator, anyone listening, give it a go, and you can sort of see how as you increase the number of years, the pot just gets bigger and bigger, and most of that is because of compounding.
If you ever want to gas yourself up to how rich you could be, use one of those calculators. You was like, you mean what? I can put this much away and I'll be a millionaire?
But one comment I always get though, actually, and I talk about this earlier on in the book, I call it the paradox, where it's people always leave comments on my post like, oh, why would you want to be rich in 40 years time? Like a clown emoji, or like, oh, I don't want to be rich so I'm like dead. And it's like, that is a fair comment. Like, but I guess first of all, you'd rather have some sort of wealth that you can have an easier retirement and pass it down. But secondly, and probably more importantly, if you want to get to wealth quicker, then it isn't rocket science. You need to just earn more money and invest more. Imagine right now, and it is difficult in reality, but you can double your income somehow by moving jobs, getting a second job, starting a side hustle. You can double your income, double how much you're investing. Put that in the compound interest calculator, then you can see how you can just increase your wealth even quicker. So it is difficult because you've got to think long term, but then if you want to get there quicker, you've got to try and invest more. So it's sort of like a balancing act between understanding it's going to take a while, but then trying to increase your income and invest more so you can speed up that sort of financial freedom sort of blueprint. Yeah,
absolutely. I completely agree. You touched on this slightly as well, but I think, and we talked about like behavior when it comes to money, but what do you think is the role that mindset plays when it comes to investing? And additionally, like, what do you think is an important mindset to have?
Yeah, I think being an investor, I guess the two, when it comes to the mindset, is you have to have a long-term mindset and understand it's not there's no really such thing as get rich quick. Most like lottery winners go broke. Most athletes end up going broke or losing all their money. So you've got to understand it's a long-term game. And then secondly, you really just not got to get sucked into the, like, all of the media now more than ever is all like clickbait, fear mongering,
hype cycles,
boom, bust, literally jump on the next trend. And then in the meantime, the global stock market continues to slowly go up over time. I'll make a video like this stock's going to boom by 4,000% in the next year, I'll get like 1 million views. If I'm like, my global index fund is going to make 8% over the next 30 years, no one will watch it. But the reality is, the second one is far more likely.
Maybe we're missing something,
and that will make me a millionaire.
Maybe we should follow these other channels.
Just jump on.
Post those videos, get 1 million views, get a few £1,000 from that video AdSense, and then invest that. maybe we're missing a trick there.
But yeah, I'd say like long-term mindset, and then sort of not getting sucked into that fear, greed, clickbaity sort of like hype cycle stuff.
Yeah, it is hard, and I think patience, is a good one.
Patience is a big one.
Because I struggle. Like, my natural mindset doesn't lend. Actually, to be fair, with investing, it does lend itself to be quite good because I have quite a high tolerance to risk.
That's good.
Not always, but like I can weather a few storms because I've had to. but I think generally, like, being able to think long term is probably one of the key things to have
100%
mindset wise, and not to be like spooked when things either go super well or you perceive them to be going super well, or the other way as well. Don't be spooked because none of it's real. None of it's real until it's real. So.
100%. I think that's probably the two key points. But yeah, Psychology of Money, honestly, just read that.
No. Read yours.
I didn't read this. Read mine first.
What do you think that like is important when it comes to managing risk when it comes to investing? Because this is the other big thing. When we put out a call out, everyone was like, like how do I do it but without a risk,
Mm-hmm.
right? And I think people, the word risk, almost I feel like needs a separate definition when it comes to investing, because I think people need to understand the relationship between risk return and investing and how it's different to the concept of things being risky, right? But how do you think people should understand and manage risk?
Yeah, so I think even before getting into that, like even with risk, it's like obviously saving is seen as not risky, and it isn't risky. But by saving, that money is being eroded due to inflation.
Yeah,
and
well, inflation risk exists.
Exactly, yeah, and it's worth less and less. So people are like taking and this is a bit cliche, but the biggest risk is not investing, because if you are having your money sat in the bank for the last 10 years, it'd probably be worth half of what it is now because inflation's been so high.
Yeah.
And yeah, that's actually a risk by leaving that money just sat in the bank.
Yeah.
I think when it comes to investing though, there is a risk in the sense that it sort of depends, because if you're going to just chuck all your money into one random stock that your mate told you about down the pub, that's obviously very risky, and it's likely you're going to lose all your money. If you're investing in a sensible way, in my opinion, using sort of low cost index funds, which we can get into, then that is a less, there is still some risk because markets are volatile and there's always going to be recessions and booms and busts, but that is a lower risk way because you invest into thousands of companies around the world to grow your wealth over time. You could then also look at lowering your risk even further by investing into a fund that contains stocks and bonds, rather than just being 100% in like a low cost stock index fund. And then of course, yeah, so there are different risks, but I think that if you can understand that your cash is losing value each year and that's a risk, and then realize you need to invest and then invest in a sensible way, in my opinion, as I talk through and have for years using low cost index funds, there's probably like the least risky way to grow your wealth over the long term. And realistically, if you invest into a global index fund like I do, that has thousands of stocks in the one fund, if that was to go to zero, it would literally be like a nuclear war, zombie apocalypse.
You'd have bigger things to worry about.
And like, I mean, I wouldn't be checking my Vanguard portfolio.
We'd have bigger things to worry about.
So, and I've used like a few technical terms there for like a bit of investing jargon, but there's always going to be some risk. But you can like think about, I guess, reframing that risk as it is risk, but it's also opportunity.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you're only ever going to save. That loses out due to inflation.
Yeah.
You're always going to have to work, relying on that paycheck. Yeah. Investing gives you the chance to not always rely on that one paycheck, not have your money eroded to inflation, and actually give you the chance to build your wealth over the long term, retire early, and then pass it down.
Yeah, absolutely. And I like what you said there about a risk and opportunity, because I think people often think of these concepts in isolation, but risk, it has almost a symbiotic relationship with opportunity and reward.
As you said, a risk reward, yeah.
Exactly. So, and they're intrinsically linked, I think, to each other. But additionally, risk can be managed. And you've touched on 2 points, and we'll go into it later as well. Risk is managed through, first of all, time.
Yeah.
And then
that's actually true.
And then diversification.
Yeah.
Right? So it's not like this risk exists and you can't do anything about it.
Yeah.
Right? There's risk, and it has a relationship with reward, and also there are ways to manage the risk. Yeah. So it's different to it being like, oh my God, that is such a high risk thing to do. You're gambling. It's very different.
Yeah, investing as gambling is a classic thing.
Yeah.
Where, I mean, if your mate tells you a stock down the pub and you chuck your money in that,
that is gambling.
That's obviously stupid, and that's gambling. You might as well go on to like the roulette table.
Yeah.
But as you mentioned, time is actually a great point, because the longer your time horizon, the less risk there is. I think the S&P 500, the largest 500 companies in America, and usually a good sort of gauge of how the global economy is performing, that's never had a negative 20-year return. And it's actually normally very positive in every 20-year period whenever you start. And if you're investing into it consistently, then you're going to build your wealth over that time. But even if you zoom out further, 30, 40 years, you're investing for decades, the longer your time horizon, as you mentioned, the less risk there's going to be. Often I get comments as well like, oh, if I want to retire in 5 years, what do I need to invest into? I'm like, mate, like, you're not going to do that for If you want to become rich, like really rich, really quick, you need to essentially start your own business, which is the riskiest thing you can do, because most businesses fail in the first year. You need to start your own business, become very successful, and then sell it for millions. That's really the only way to become rich quick. But even that often takes a lot of trial and error and decades and decades.
And it's not actually that quick.
And it's often very difficult. So that's probably like the way to become rich quick if you wanted to. But in reality, excluding that, or inherit money. If you inherit money,
that is the quickest way.
That is,
the quickest way to get rich is to inherit money.
And I think make a business.
And most people don't talk about that, by the way.
Yeah.
And I think that's important to talk about, right? We're about to walk into a world which is going to be, it's an era of inheritocracy. That's what it's called.
Oh,
right?
good
There's a word for it. Yeah, it's called inheritocracy, which it is quite troubling because most people won't talk about it because it's awkward, right? But majority of the way people are acquiring things isn't through their own behavior, isn't through their own acumen. It's inherited wealth.
Yeah.
And there's nothing wrong with that because hopefully we're going to be in a position where we're able to have loads for our
future generations.
future generations to inherit as well. And it's a similar thing. For example, the Bank of Mum and Dad being, I think it's the 4th largest lender in the UK now.
Oh,
I think it might be the 4th now. Yeah,
that is a good stat. That is funny.
And that is a form of inheritance, by the way.
Like house deposits.
That's a form of inheritance, and because parents are effectively passing on a portion of their wealth that they accumulated to kids that so that they can purchase their homes, which is great.
It's a good way to do it as well because if you pass the
Tax
money,
efficient.
there's no capital gains tax, and if they live for 7 years, there's no inheritance tax.
Exactly.
So it's actually a tax efficient way to build the family wealth.
Even
more if you're in a fortunate position.
I heard something funny enough. I heard something the other day saying that inheritance tax is for rich people that didn't trust their kids, basically, because they wait to die before they pass on their wealth,
and they lose 40%.
exactly, because they didn't trust their kids with the money now.
Yeah.
So apparently that's another way to look at it.
Yeah.
But that is important. If you want to get rich quick, like have rich parents.
Yeah.
And inherit a load of wealth.
Yeah.
And I know it sounds really like sad to look at that way. It's the truth, by the way.
Yeah.
The quickest way to be really rich is to have rich parents, and people don't talk about that enough.
Yeah, no, agreed.
And I think that's because there's this whole the whole American dream concept that has flown into But even the richest people in America, some of these billionaires, were given huge privileges.
It's like Donald Trump got a small loan of $1 million.
Yeah, exactly. I got a small loan of $1 million, which he lost as well. And then, but even if you hear the story of Bill Gates,
even like Jeff Bezos, I got a small sum of $100K to start my business.
Yeah, exactly.
So in today's money, that's so much.
Yeah,
more.
Exactly. And also even Elon Musk.
Yeah.
He's, I think his dad or his family had dubious wealth in the diamond mines. In South Africa. So. Everyone they need to understand that there are rags to riches stories, right? But there are huge privileges that some people have, 100%. But that shouldn't dissuade people from making their own. There's no traffic in your own lane. That's something that someone told me. There is absolutely no traffic in your own lane.
Quote, actually.
Yeah, thanks. That's my one. And sometimes, but it's good to just focus sometimes and be like, okay, these are the cards I was dealt. But actually, I can do quite a lot with it. Yeah,
I was going to say, that's why there's no point, what's that, the comparisons, the thief of joy?
Yeah,
that
we're pulling them all out
today. I know, so many quotes there. It's like a older, what's it, MySpace page, whatever. We had a little you got your own circumstances.
Yeah.
And the thing is, I always say, I actually made a video on this recently as well, but if you are able to invest, that, once again, is a privilege.
Yeah.
So if you're able to invest, it means you're in a country where you have access to an investment platform.
Mm-hmm.
Most half the world doesn't, and you have disposable income, excess disposable income that you can use to invest. So even just being able to invest is a privilege. But then if you're able to then use whatever privilege you have to your advantage to build your wealth, then I would say, and if you can inherit money or get money passed down, that's obviously great. And if you're using it to benefit your own wealth in a positive way and not just wasting it, then I guess that's fair enough.
That's such a great attitude and such a good way to look at it. And another thing, I'm the first to complain about the UK as it is now, as you know, right? But one thing that I will say is when it comes to personal investment opportunities and ease of personal banking, the UK is actually probably one of the best places. It's one of the best places in the world.
In America, you can't bank transfer people.
No, I know.
You need Cash App or Venmo.
Yeah, it's mental. Still, exactly.
It's absolutely
we've had
barbaric.
We've had neobanks
transfer.
We've had neobanks for almost 10 years.
Yeah,
and I think we underestimate how uncommon that is to have that kind of infrastructure. So as much as I complain about the UK, there are certain things that we should be taking advantage of, and one of them being how low the barrier to entry to investment is.
Yeah.
So with that in mind, right?
Good segue.
Yeah. With that in mind, and I want people listening as well. We're gonna frame this as a beginner to investing, right? And you're convinced now. You're convinced, okay, I understand. I need to invest. I want to grow my wealth. Hopefully. And I'm going to think long term. How would we take people through that process? And I really want to make it as simple as possible. Yeah, as simple as possible.
Yeah.
So that people can understand. And even when we're talking about investing, what kind of assets are we talking about?
Yeah.
So you have a blueprint.
Yeah. So this is
where do we start?
3-step blueprint. So it is choosing a investment platform, choosing a investment account, and then choosing a actual investment. So to go through those 3 steps in chronological order, the first step is choosing a platform. So this may be called a broker. It's essentially just a website or an app. So you've probably seen adverts like at football games, on the tube, on TV, heard people talk about it, but there's actually so many good investing platforms in the UK. A few good ones just to reel off: Vanguard, Trading 212, Invest Engine. Different platforms have different pros and cons. I personally like Vanguard. I talk about them a lot in the book, but just open an account on a website or app. The thing is, it's not like a mortgage. You're not locked in. You can change platforms. You can test out loads of platforms. So if you're really worried, I would just say download those 3 I just mentioned. You can download more as well. Apps, go on the website and just actually have a play around and see which one you like the most. So step 1 is actually choosing a platform, but that's essentially just a website or an app.
Yeah. And I think that's a really good place to start.
Yeah.
And I would say when it comes to choosing your app, and because I have actually experimented across the board with the different apps and made loads of mistakes as well. And when you're choosing your app, my personal advice would be think about how involved you want to be with your investment. So if you want to basically treat it like a savings account and not do anything, you just want to put your money in and forget about it, there's a group of apps that are really good to consider. If you want to be a bit more involved at choosing your investments, there's a selection of apps that are really good to consider. If you want low fee, or if you want to look at just a variety of funds, there's also another selection of apps to look at. But you're right, the first step is to find the app that suits you.
Yeah, and just download a few and just try them out.
Yeah.
I do personally like Vanguard, but I think try out a few, and the 2 main things to look at, in my opinion, are the fees and I guess the reputation or the track record of the platform. So if they've got low fees and they've got transparent fees, that's great. And as a rule of thumb, I generally try and keep my overall investing fees to be less than 0.5% a year. And of course, the lower the better. It does depend what the platform fee is, and also if you invest into a fund, what the fund fee is, which will come on to step 3 of the blueprint. But if you can keep your total fees below 0.5%, in my opinion, that's what to aim for. And then the second thing is then the actual reputation. How long is ultimately you're giving them your money that you've worked hard for. Yeah. You don't have to go under in a few years. So are they regulated, FCA regulated? Do they offer FSCS protection for the first £85,000? Have they been around for decades? Do they have good reviews, good customer service? Ask word of mouth, look it up online. You're putting your money in there, so you want them to actually be trustworthy and reputable. So yeah, fees and reputation. But I think we've already mentioned a few that I like anyway. And I personally do prefer the DIY approach, because that gives me a bit more flexibility in terms of what I invest into and lowers my fees that I pay. But if you want to do less, then as you mentioned, there are sort of robo-advisors platforms that will charge slightly higher fees, but then I'll do a bit more for you.
So and I'll quickly make that distinction. So there's, like Ryan said, how involved you want to be. So do it yourself. Pick the investments that you're going to be making, which I would generally say the more comfortable you get with investing, you kind of want to switch over to that kind of investing. You don't have to. I actually was in the robo-advisor side for quite a while because I just didn't want to think about it anymore. Yeah. I tried it myself and I I experimented with a robo-advisor and then I did it myself, and the robo-advisor outperformed my personal choices by about 8%. So I obviously went that way for a bit. But there are choices. So for example, there's Trading 212 is an obvious one that people use, and it's really low fee. But again, you're picking your investments yourself. Yeah. Vanguard is obviously probably the most popular platform globally. Yeah. Or one of
the biggest asset managers, so it's generally quite safe, so people like it. Yeah.
Hargreaves Lansdown is another one.
Yeah, I think that's probably the biggest one in the UK actually. Hargreaves Lansdown.
Yeah, it is, and I think that's where a lot of people start. But then there's also loads of robo-advisors like Nutmeg. I actually use Warhead, so I did Sharia compliant investing. and the point is, there's loads of options coming out, but you want to consider initially the first choice you want to make is the investment platform.
Yeah.
So let's say, okay, we've picked ours. We're going either Vanguard or Trading 212.
Yeah. I like those two.
Okay.
But yeah, so you pick a platform. Then step 2, and this is actually a much easier decision, is choosing an actual investing account. And the way I sort of describe it is choose an account with tax advantages. And in the UK, there's essentially 2 main accounts to do that. It's a stocks and shares ISA and a pension. So a pension could either be a workplace pension, which many people might have already and don't even realise that they've got that and now investing, or it could be a private pension, which is a SIP, a self-invested personal pension. But you've essentially got an ISA or a pension, and they are then accounts. The best way to describe these is that these are wrappers that hold the actual investments. Often hear people say something like, oh, my pension's gone up 20% this year. It's actually the investments inside of your pension that have gone up 20%. The pension or the stocks and shares ISA is just the wrapper that is on the platform and that holds the investments. And that sort of wrapper, each different wrapper has different pros and cons. So very sort of high level, a stocks and shares ISA, the main pros are that once the money is in any type of ISA, it grows tax-free. So any sort of profit from the wrapper is tax-free. So when it comes to investing, that's capital gains and dividends. So I guess the beauty of a stock and shares ISA is, and I do talk a lot about them for years and years, is you put money in it and you're just not got to worry about any future tax bill. It's just really easy. You also get a massive £20,000 allowance each tax year, and probably the best perk of them is they're completely flexible. So if you are in a fortunate position where you earn a big salary, can invest a lot per month and max that out for years and years, if you build that pot to $1 million by the time you're 40, you can then live off of that money. You can draw down on it whenever you want.
And just to emphasize that, why it's so good in the UK, right? That first of all, that 20 grand allowance, first of all, is amazing.
Unreal.
There's
no equivalent in Australia.
Or America.
American, the Roth IRA, it's only $6,000.
Exactly.
So the £20,000 allowance is overpowered. Is mental.
Crazy. I mean, it's a shame that not many people, the salaries in the UK are so rubbish that not many people actually end up filling it up. But
anything if you can put in though is a benefit.
100%. And the other point that I'm going to make, again, just to really emphasize, because again, people get confused by the jargon. So we're talking about stocks and shares ISAs, we're talking about investment accounts. It seems really obvious to us. Your stocks and shares ISA, think of it as, you refer to it as a wrapper, which is correct. It literally makes the money tax free. And I'm saying it like that because just to emphasize, it's the wrapper that makes the money tax free. And in this country, one of the things that death and taxes, right?
Always death and taxes.
It's death and taxes. But there are few opportunities and vehicles that allow you to make your wealth tax free. Right?
That's true.
Your stocks and shares ISA is one of those, right? It's a shield around the money that you've invested. And no matter how much it grows, it's always going to be tax free. Let's give another ridiculous example. Let's say you've invested 20 grand, right? And let's say that 20 grand becomes 500 grand. It doesn't matter. That 500 grand is tax free. The taxman can't touch it. It's all yours. It's all yours.
And that's why that's so good.
Exactly.
If you're in a fortunate position where you can max it out in your early years and you start early and build up to 500k, you can access that money whenever you want, which really is the beauty of it. But then on the sort of other hand, and I often get this comment as well from time to time, it's like, oh, I can only invest like £1,000 this year. Like, what's the point? I'm like, still do it. When I first started my stocks and shares ISA, I was doing 100 quid a month. Even if it's £5 a month, anything is better, and any of that allowance you can use up is great, because you mentioned that sort of shield means anything it grows to, it just completely, any gains, dividends, everything's just tax free. So not only is that great, then you've not got to fill in some like self-assessment form to HMRC and work out how much tax you got to pay.
Exactly.
But so that's stocks and shares ISAs. And then the other really good account in the UK is a pension. So with a pension, whether it's a workplace pension or a private pension, and there's a little bit more going on here, but the main benefit is you get tax relief. So I guess the easy way to think about this is, if you put money into a pension, that gets topped up by the rate at which you pay income tax. So if you're a basic rate taxpayer earning less than 50 grand, it'll be 20%, and then it gets more and more lucrative the more money you earn, up to 40 and 45%, depending on your income tax band. So you're getting tax relief, so you're essentially avoiding income tax. So you've got more money going into the pot. That pension pot then grows and compounds as well tax-free over the years. And if it's a workplace pension, you should be able to get an employer match. So whatever that is, just take it. 5%, 10%, 15%. It's literally free money.
Yeah.
So you're getting tax relief. You got double the amount of money going in. And this is why so many people become like pension millionaires.
Yeah.
Just by working a job, doing work, getting promoted, employer match, tax relief, then all of a sudden, after doing that for years, and if you've done a job you enjoy, doesn't feel like work, that's obviously a dream, then all of a sudden you've got a massive pension pot. And then that then grows, tax-free again. Of course, with pensions though, death and taxes, because we avoid tax at the start, you then do have to pay, you can take 25% tax-free lump sum, and then depending on how you draw down the other 75%, you probably will have to pay some tax. There's a bit more sort of financial planning there. But I guess to sort of compare the two, with a stock shares ISA, you pay tax today, it grows tax-free, you never pay tax again. With a pension, you avoid tax today, it grows tax-free, but then you may have to pay tax in the future. So they sort of almost opposite. But, and this is my sort of like two-pronged approach when I was living in the UK anyway, is that if I can use my employer match workplace pension, get that tax relief, have that pot going, then at the same point, I've got my stocks and shares ISA pot, which I'm contributing to for my current account, get my net pay, put a bit in my stocks and shares ISA every month. Then I got those two pots growing over the long term. And just to re-emphasize, these are just the wrappers. So the accounts that hold the money, and they have pros and cons. The main pros being that they both grow tax-free over the years. And of course, an ISA is accessible whenever, and a pension, you get that tax relief. So hopefully that sort of breaks down the accounts. But the third type of account is in a general investment account or a general account. Or GIA, you may have heard these words for it. With that type of account, there's no tax advantages, which is why there are some situations where it can be useful, but generally speaking, for 95% of people, you just want to be using a pension, an ISA, or both to grow your wealth over the long term.
Yeah, completely agree. So, step one, we chose an investment platform. Step two, we made it tax efficient to protect our future millions and millions from tax. And then step three is
choose an actual investment. So this is probably the most difficult one, just because there are thousands of choices. So this is the actual fund or stock you're going to invest into inside of, for example, your stocks and shares ISA, which is on a platform, for example, Trading 212. So it could be Trading 212, and then it could be a stock and shares ISA, then it could be a fund, could be Vanguard, a pension, and then a different type of fund. So you can sort of tweak this 3 steps however you want and make it work for you. But the third step is choosing an actual investment. This is what is actually essentially your money's going to go into, and it's going to grow your wealth. This one is difficult, as I mentioned, because there's thousands of options. There are thousands of stocks all around the world. There are literally thousands and thousands of index funds and ETFs, which are technical terms. But that's what I personally invest into. And in the book, I talk about choosing a low-cost global fund. So let's go back to basics. When it comes to, I guess, the world, you got obviously companies. So you got companies all around the world who are trying to make profit. They got offices, they got employees, they're making goods and services. The really good companies then get listed on a stock exchange. And the reason why you'd want to do that is because if you get listed on a stock exchange, you can essentially raise more money and try and grow the business or the company. Once it then gets listed on a stock exchange, could be the London Stock Exchange, the New York Stock Exchange, there's once again loads around the world, it gets a bit complicated. But once you get sort of listed and go public, as it's called, we, as normal people, can then just buy and sell their stock. So if you have a mate, I've got a few mates actually that work at startups, they then list, and then you can then like invest into the company to support your mate or whatever it is. Of course, most people invest into companies to try and grow their wealth and hope the company's going to grow. But that is essentially an individual stock. And there are thousands of those around the world. Most of them ultimately fail just because making money and being a business is hard, and it always has been. You then get funds. So funds will then group hundreds or if not thousands of companies together. And often these are called indexes. So, for example, the FTSE 100 is an index of the largest 100 UK companies. The S&P 500, we've already touched on, is an index of the largest 500 US companies. You've got the FTSE 250. You then have global index funds. You have the NASDAQ, which is another index. So you've got so many different types of indexes. But all these are already doing are just grouping sort of similar companies together. We then, as investors, can then invest into these sort of indexes, this collection of companies, by using index funds and ETFs. So all index funds and ETFs are, to sort of conclude on that point, is just like a basket of companies. And the great thing is, rather than us say buying one share of every company in the FTSE 100, we can just invest into the FTSE 100 index fund, and that's going to invest into the 100 largest UK companies to get that instant diversification for a low fee. And it's inherently less risky because you're investing into 100 companies rather than just one. And I then obviously take that to the most diversified point as possible, being a global index fund. So I know people like specifics. The one that I use, the FTSE Global All Cap. I've talked about that online for years. Another good one's called the FTSE All World, or VWRP. That's a similar version.
We'll come on to that, because I'm going to ask you about your actual current investment portfolio, which you obviously share all the time, very transparently. But you made a really good point there. And again, to simplify and make sure that people understand the brilliant points that you've made, is when investing, like, there's a lot of fear because people are like, oh my God, how am I going to pick the right stock? How am I going to make the right punt? And you don't have to. Right? Because let's say you can go and be like, you're going to hear loads of people, especially over the next 4 years, talking about Tesla and how much of a great investment that is. And it looks like an amazing investment right now. Apple, right. You can do that. You can go and invest individually into Google and Apple and Tesla. And I've done the same before. I've bought into an Amazon, right? By the way, each of those companies in the last 3 years, I think, has experienced being in the red if you had invested in the last 3 years at some point, right?
That's how volatile it is. You think the stock market is volatile, the individual stocks are even more mental.
It's super volatile. The way to avoid that, and the reason you invest in an index, which is effectively a basket of all of these companies that you will have invested into or want to invest into anyway, you can do that in one purchase, right? So rather than putting £100 in Google and then £100 in Amazon and then £100 in Tesla and then £100 in Meta, and then sitting there and just watching it every day, hoping it goes up a lot. What you can do is take £100 or take £400 and put it into a global diversified index fund. It doesn't even need to be a global index fund, but that's probably the most diversified.
That's what I do, but it can be a US index fund, a UK index fund.
And what diversification means is that your money is spread across those companies, so that if any one of those companies was not to do as well or was to do poorly, it would be balanced out against the other companies that might be doing a bit better. So you're literally not putting all of your eggs in one basket. You're quite literally spreading the risk, right? And it's protecting you. That's why I think the big messaging is always around, if you're a beginner especially, even if you're not a beginner, if you want to get rich slowly, but get rich for sure, you want to invest in a diversified way.
100%.
And one of the first means of diversification is to diversify where you put your investments and what you're actually investing into. And then that diversification can stretch over asset classes, over geographies, over different sectors, right? It can get as complex as you like. But diversification is a really important thing to understand, because it literally means you're not putting all of your eggs in one basket.
Yeah, 100%. And what you'll see is, and what you'll notice is, even some of the biggest companies 20 years ago aren't the biggest companies today. And they probably won't be the biggest companies in 20 years, because the competitive landscape's always changing as new technologies come along in industry.
Especially now, in the last 3 years, OpenAI has now become one of the biggest companies in the world.
Exactly. So it can happen so quickly. And by owning index funds, the best way to sort of describe it is you're always owning the best companies. And even though some big companies will probably fail, another company will take its place, and the overall global economy becomes more productive and innovative over time, which is then why these global index funds slowly grow over time. It's not to say they won't ever crash. They 100% will crash. And on average, there's a big crash every 7 to 8 years of 20% or more. So even a global index fund that owns thousands of companies, it will crash over and over again, but it'll then still own the best companies and still grow slowly over time as these companies become more productive. And I think just whether you're a beginner, or I think what I've actually found myself is, as I become more experienced investing, I actually appreciate these low-cost global index funds even more, because I just chuck money into them. I don't need to research anything. I don't need to read financial statements. I could be doing exams, going on holiday, working a 9 to 5, making a TikTok, whatever I'm doing. And then these global index funds are slowly increasing in value over time as the companies perform well. The reason why I use global ones and I go into some sort of data in the book and in some previous videos I've done on YouTube and stuff, but it's usually the best country doesn't stay the best country forever. If you look at Japan, it made up 45% of the stock market in the 80s. It had all the best innovative companies, tech, cars, everything. Now it's worth about 6% of the global stock market.
Crazy.
So if you'd only invested in Japan, because that was the best country for a decade, then you wouldn't have made as much money as had you used a global fund. And that's why I guess with a global fund, it's like it takes any guessing out of the question. Don't get me wrong, the US is the biggest and most powerful stock market and country. It makes up 60% of the global stock market. They look unstoppable. How are like Tesla, Amazon, Apple all going to fail? But no one really knows. Could India, they might be the biggest stock market in a few years.
Or the BRICS,
China,
came together.
all the emerging markets. And the problem is, I sort of concede that I don't know what's going to be the best. So by using a global fund, I just capture the whole world. And as that sort of world becomes more productive and innovative, the global fund grows with it.
Absolutely. We'll touch on that. And I guess for people that are a bit more experienced investors, they'll probably be a bit more interested about some of the stuff we're going to have to say in a bit as well.
But sorry, just to wrap up though, so that's step 3 though of the blueprint is then choosing actual investment. And it is the hardest part by a mile. But if you can choose like a low cost index fund, I reckon keep the bulk of your portfolio in that. Maybe chuck in some individual stocks you believe in, chuck in some other like AI fund, cloud computing fund. But if you can keep the bulk of your investments in low cost US or global index funds, that really is what's going to sort of be the backbone of your wealth building investment pot over the decades.
So to summarize this point, I'm gonna go ahead to one of the questions we got from our community, which was, how can you get started with investing with only £1,000? That is plenty to start.
That's
right,
more than enough.
Right? And let's use your blueprint, right?
Yeah.
So first of all, we're going to choose an investment platform. Let's go with
Trading 212.
Okay, Trading 212
platform.
And then we need to choose an investment account, stocks and shares ISA.
Yeah.
Right. So we got £1,000. We open up a Trading 212 account. Then, by the way, Trading 212 are not sponsoring this, but if you want to, there is a sponsorship segment available on this podcast.
That'd be a good one to get.
We do charge a bit more than others, but it's worth it.
Worth every penny. I had to pay a lot of money.
So Trading 212 account, open up a stocks and shares ISA in your Trading 212 account.
Yeah.
And then we're going to pick an investment, and I think we'll go for a globally diversified investment fund, which
FTSE All World, VWRP, that invests into 3,500 stocks all around the world. It's still, the bulk of it is in US stocks because they dominate the global economy. But that's a low cost global ETF, and that's all you need to do. Another tough question that comes with this is, you got £1,000.
Yeah.
Should you stick it all in one go?
Yeah, we're going to come to that.
Or
the dollar cost
should
average.
You cost average it over time?
So I actually had this conversation with a friend of mine today. He was just like, I just want to slap it all in. Like, I've just got this amount of money. Like, I've got this bulk of money. I was like, drip feeding is better. This is another thing that I will ask people to go away and research further, or we will share content from our own platforms. The concept of dollar or pound cost averaging. I won't confuse people too much with that now, but it is generally seen as being a better option for you to drip feed money in over a period of time, but very consistently, than just putting a lump sum in one go. And that's because you're able to weather the highs and lows of any market and, again, manage that risk.
Yeah. I can send you, actually, there's a really good study done by Vanguard, and I can send you the link if you want to put it in the notes to the podcast. But when it comes to lump sum investing versus dollar cost average, or cost averaging, where you just sort of invest every month, lump sum investing, so in this case £1,000, mathematically 2/3 of the time would perform better.
Wow.
The reason being is because as the stock market generally goes up over time, the quicker you can get the money invested, it immediately starts making a gain and starts earning dividends, and that then compounds sort of from the start. But 1/3 of the time, cost averaging outperforms. But it's probably more, I sort of look at it, mathematically lump sum investing normally wins, but I think psychologically and mentally, particularly if you're a new investor, cost averaging is almost going to be better because it avoids any sort of unlucky market timing impact. So imagine you start investing in February 2020 with $1,000 and the market drops 35%. You'll be petrified, think investing is a scam, and then not invest again. And that's what you really want to avoid as a new investor. So I would say if you're more of an experienced investor and can tolerate the risk, put the $1,000 in. But if you're newer, a bit more nervous, a bit more risk averse, just do £100 a month and you'll slowly get that money in. But yeah, there is a good study and there is some data behind it. But I think if you're new, just drip feed it in over time and you sort of build that habit, get used to the volatile nature of the market. Yeah. But as you sort of mentioned as well, naturally, you will hopefully be dollar cost averaging. If you've been investing every month through your workplace pension, every month for a couple of years into your stocks and shares ISA, you will be cost averaging, drip feeding every single month. So what I do now personally, if I come into any like lump sums, normally like a bonus from work, for example, because I've now built up a decent pot, I will just chuck it all in one go. It's also probably worth mentioning. I would say it depends how big the lump sum is compared to your current investment portfolio. If you've got £1,000 invested and you get a £5,000 lump sum, that is massive. So if you chuck that in and then the market drops, you're going to be like petrified. So I think it also depends on, now that I've got a 6-figure portfolio, if I get like a £3,000 bonus from work once a year, I'll be like, it's actually a small part of my pot, fortunately, so I'll just chuck it all in. But years and years ago, when I had a £5,000 pot, if I got a £5,000 influx or bonus or whatever, I'll be like, okay, let me drip feed it in because that's a big percentage relative to my pot. So that's sort of another consideration. But I think if in doubt, just cost averaging, as you said, over time. But yeah, if you don't need the money though for like decades and you're sure you've got that mindset or you're not going to get scared if the market drops, you could just chuck it all in and just let it ride.
Yeah. Okay.
It is an interesting discussion though, because it's like one of the golden questions of investing. And it's like, well, if you can look forward a year and the market's going to go straight up, then you should have lumped it in. If the market is going to crash like tomorrow, then it would have been better to drip feed it in. And of course, you can't like predict what's going to happen. So I always say to people, just in general, when it comes to investing, do what makes you feel most comfortable and do what's going to help you sleep the easiest at night, because that's an underrated aspect of investing.
Yeah, and it comes back to the whole point of behavior and mindset when it comes to investing. There are a few more things that I want to quickly ask you. Yeah. And we'll come to our favorite topic. I think we spoke about this together about 4 years ago. And we were like some of the only ones talking about it on the internet because everyone else was too scared. I remember. No, I'm joking. But what are your views on crypto?
Yeah, I do like crypto. I've been investing into it monthly for 4 or 5 years now. Okay, yeah, because I think with crypto as well, it is still a bit of the Wild West. People got to understand it's still a very new asset class. So Bitcoin, the first crypto, was created in 2008. Most of them are worth nothing, and most of them will fail. So, and even as an asset class, it may still fail. So currently for me, about 15-20% of my portfolio is in crypto. So someone said to me the other day, and I think this is a good way to describe it, I've sort of took like a calculated risk by investing in crypto. I think most people have like no other investments, don't know what the stock market is, chuck a few grand in crypto, lose it all, and then once again think it's a scam and think they shouldn't invest. So I think it comes once again back to a bit of understanding. But to sort of take you through my crypto journey, back in 2019, 2020, before I started investing and dollar cost averaging regularly, I read a few books. So 3 really good books is Digital Gold, The History of Bitcoin, The Bitcoin Standard, A History of Money, and then Crypto Assets, more actually about what is cryptocurrency. I read those books. I was then a fan of crypto, and specifically I mainly invest into Bitcoin and Ethereum. And then for the last sort of 4.5 years, I've been putting a little bit of money every single month into those 2 cryptocurrencies. Same. It's still a new space, and it's volatile like mad compared to the stock market and the property market. But yeah, I sort of took a calculated risk. Could be worth nothing, could change the world, could be something in the middle, I don't know. But by putting a little bit of money into it, it's sort of like a higher risk, higher return play that I'm making. Yeah,
absolutely. And I think I've been quite similar. I'm a crypto fan as well. But again, I'm probably, of the crypto fans, they consider me really boring, because similar to you, all I invest into is Bitcoin, Ethereum, and Solana. That is my crypto portfolio.
Just stick to the big ones.
And I just put money away into there, and I'm quite comfortable. And just to say, now is a very good time. Like obviously we're smiling right
Yeah.
now. Like we're at all-time highs. Everyone's looking at crypto again. And it's like Bitcoin's almost hit 100 grand.
Mental.
ETH is doing well. Like so, like everything's doing well when Bitcoin's doing well generally. And we're smiling now, but 18 months ago, I was looking at my portfolio at heavy. Like, did Bitcoin dropped about 70%? Didn't it?
Yeah, I think there's a stat where, on average, every 2 to 3 years, Bitcoin drops about 80-90%, and it almost certainly, even though like last cycle there was like institutional buyers, now there's like potentially governments buying it. It does sort of get a stronger case each sort of few years, but there almost certainly will still be massive drops.
Yeah, I used a phrase which my friends use against me all the time now. I can't believe I'm admitting to this. Right, I obviously oversimplified what I meant. Yeah, and I was like, yeah, obviously Bitcoin crashes like 90% all the time, but generally it crashes upwards.
That's true.
Yeah, and the thing is, obviously,
it crashes.
Right, looking at what I said right now is quite funny because I was right. Yeah. But for the last 2 years, they were like, look at this idiot crashing upwards. Yeah, 90% down.
That's a good way to explain.
Yeah, but generally that might again. My crypto investments are not my entire portfolio. I'm probably a bit more exposed now because it's the gains have been really high. But I believe it's a risk worth taking. The upside is great, but the downside is I won't lose all my money if it goes to zero.
Yeah, you sort of like stock market index fund.
It'll be painful.
Cash to back you up.
It'll be really painful.
Yeah.
But it won't like completely wipe me out.
Yeah. No, I got similar views to you, and I think if people want to learn about it, read a few books. What you'll see is often people will be like have a self-interest for certain small cryptocurrencies and like push them to pump them up, and then now sell. You get like left holding the bag and all of these sort of terms that people use. I personally believed in the sort of asset class by reading some books and doing my own research, and I thought if the asset class was gonna succeed and actually stick around, then I thought it would be the big two that do stick around. So that's why I personally use those two. I mean, it's still worth saying that I think Bitcoin makes up over 50% of the total crypto market capitalization, the total value of all cryptocurrencies. So it's almost like the US actually. When it comes to the US making up the majority of the global stock market, it's the same with like Bitcoin and the global crypto market. So it is the biggest by a mile. And I think like if Bitcoin fails, probably every other crypto will fail.
Yeah, absolutely. The same way when it's doing well, everything else
gets dragged up.
The other thing that I wanted to touch on is we know that global like current affairs impacts markets in every way, positively and negatively. Yeah. For example, you mentioned like the wars that impacted the global supply chain, energy, like Russia's invasion of Ukraine, what it did, and the inflation that it caused as well. And there's terrible conflicts now in the world. Yeah, exactly. And actually some of them are like way more important than what we're talking about now. Yeah. But we have an incumbent Donald Trump presidency, a second term, and back usually again. And usually what people always try to figure out what that means for markets, for money, for business. His brand is good for business and good for markets, right? And
he almost like tries to run the country like a business.
Exactly.
I thought someone explained it to me the other day, and I was like, yeah, maybe.
Yeah, but one of the things that's really interesting, and this is why I think the cryptocurrency conversation, this is a signpost because I think it's going to become more and more prominent. And the first thing that I'm going to say is, yes, like we're both believers and investors in crypto. Be careful. Yeah. If you're a beginner, be careful. It's so volatile, and you need to understand it. Don't just. There's going to be so much hysteria. I can already tell we're hitting all-time highs.
It's going to crash.
Yeah, but like, there's going to be so much hysteria. There's so much information, and people are going to get sucked into it. You have to like hold your nerve. Yeah. Like it can be very exciting, and I think I can tell it's round the corner. But Donald Trump has pitched himself as big on crypto.
The crypto gut. The crypto president.
Exactly.
They were calling him on Twitter.
The reason, I would say part of the reason that the crypto markets are pumping at the moment is because of Trump.
100%.
And because he has pitched himself as big on crypto. Yeah. And I think that will influence a lot more institutional investment into cryptocurrencies, which is why I believe, my personal belief is that a 4-year Donald Trump presidency, if it continues to be good for crypto throughout, I think, especially the big ones, I think they're probably here to stay.
Cement them.
Yeah. And I think his presidency is going to be very good for crypto. I don't know about the markets because of his policies, which are going to be very like preventionist and
on the tariffs.
Exactly. Yeah. I think funnily enough, I think Trump could be really good for crypto and at the same time completely ruin the global economy.
That could be a prediction. Come back to this in 4 years.
Exactly, because I think he's talking about tariffs on China and Canada.
Yeah, on everyone almost.
Yeah, exactly. And like I feel like if he's really petty, right? And I feel like if the UK doesn't follow suit, if Europe doesn't move in a block, he's going to be like, okay, well, I'm going to cause trouble for you as well. So I think his presidency could cause, unfortunately, more inflation. For a number of reasons, because I think we're in such a globalized environment that everyone relies on each other. So we have
I think like half of all US company profits come from overseas now.
Exactly.
So it's more globalized than ever.
And so much of US companies' supply chain is in China.
Yeah, is overseas.
And exactly, and he's thinking we're doing 50% tariffs on.
And it's going to like stitch up their own companies, which then will get passed on to the consumers. Could be inflationary.
Exactly.
But then at the same time, he could lower taxes.
Yeah.
If inflation is cooling down a bit before these changes happen, rates could come down, interest rates. So there could be like offsetting factors. But yeah, to be honest with you, I guess like it's an interesting discussion, and I agree with your points. You make some interesting ones. But for me personally, I have no idea what's going to happen. I'm just going to continue investing. But yeah, I think for crypto though, as you mentioned, I think it's going to be good. He's sort of been deemed as like the crypto president.
Yeah, or he pitched himself as that.
Yeah.
He turned up to conventions.
Yeah, he went on to That's mental, isn't it? But if the actual US government treasury start buying crypto, they're going to be like a whale, like buying so many, like tens or hundreds of thousands of Bitcoins.
Yeah.
And I've seen these like examples where they could quite easily buy up like 10%. So it's only going to be 21 million Bitcoins. And they could quite easily buy up 10%, which would then push the price up massively. And then the US government would then be the biggest holder of Bitcoin, which is almost then, I think it's going to be, it'll almost be like the space race.
Yeah, 100%.
Where like once one country starts seriously buying it up, then everyone else doesn't want to fall behind. Yeah. And then it could just absolutely boom it. So.
I feel like we're adding to the early hysteria with crypto there. But what I will say is that again, like it's something that everyone like should understand. I believe there could be great opportunity there, right? Yeah. But at the same time, it could completely fail.
And you can't control what's
and actually, a good point to look at is two extremely smart, way smarter than us, way more qualified than us.
Debatable.
People, right? So you have Michael Saylor, who is a big crypto enthusiast.
One of the biggest. Probably the biggest.
Probably the biggest. And he has, what's his fund called? MicroStrategy. They are like... They
own tens and tens of thousands of Bitcoin.
Exactly.
All they do is they issue debt, buy Bitcoin. Issue debt. Stock price goes up. Borrow more, issue debt, buy Bitcoin.
So he literally believes Bitcoin is the complete future. Yeah. And has like... He's in the camp with price predictions of one Bitcoin reaching over $1 million, right? And then you have the Charlie Munger, who is...
And Warren Buffett as well.
And Warren Buffett, who are icons, right, in the investing world.
Some of the goats.
And they think the whole thing is a complete scam and it's ridiculous. So you have two camps, right? And one of them is wrong. One of them is wrong. And it's like, okay, no one else is going to tell you the right answer. No one knows.
And no one knows what's going to happen.
Yeah.
It's almost... If the US start buying up Bitcoin, it could boom. But they might just be lying. A lot of politicians say stuff as very like normally don't do it. If they don't do it, that might crash the price. So it's almost impossible, to predict what's going to happen. Yeah. But you make a good point. It is funny how literally everything, even like in like Tesla, Bill Gates is like shorting it, and then Elon Musk thinks it's the future. Yeah, like two of the best businessmen of all time, who have both made like billions, and then it's just so conflicting, which is what makes all this investing stuff interesting.
And through all this volatility, and to wrap up on this point as well, is with all of these question marks, they're always going to exist. There's always going to be something, but the behavior stays the same. Yeah. And through all of this, you're going to be doing exactly the same thing that built your investment portfolio in the same place, which is just to regularly put an amount into your investment portfolio each month and just keep building it.
Religiously, most of my money every month into global index funds, a little bit of money into Bitcoin and Ethereum, and just letting them ride. But I saw a really good chart recently as well. I could probably find a screenshot on my phone of even like the last 10 years, and it shows the stock market almost going up in a straight line, and it's almost like every 3 months there's like the end of the world. Like inflation, war, COVID, oil shock, Japan, like something mental is always happening, and yet the markets, whether it's Bitcoin or crypto or the stock market and global index funds, continues to go up. So I think with crypto, it is a bit more uncertain because it's a relatively new asset class. only has been around for 15 years, it could still completely fail. No one knows. But when it comes to the stock market, and this is why I keep the bulk of my money, normally 80 to 90% in global index funds. I mean, it's been around for hundreds of years. Companies are always, in my opinion, going to be around trying to make more money. So that's why I really chuck a load of money in there and just hope it continues to grow my wealth over time.
Yeah. To wrap up, that was my final question. We ask all of our guests.
Oh, yeah.
Do you have any loose change that you'd like to share with our audience? That could be a funny joke. It could be something that you read recently. It could be something that you watched. Just like a passing closing remarks.
Yeah, I'd probably say, to be honest with you, we've been talking a lot about wealth and like money investing is of course important, but, and this is obviously cliche, but it really is health is wealth. If you build up all this wealth by like literally killing yourself, working mad hours and not taking care of yourself, you can still pass it down, which is great, but I feel like you actually want to be able to enjoy it a little bit as well. So whilst you're doing all these things, if you can like travel a bit, go on holiday a bit, run, gym, whatever it is, look after yourself, then you can actually then enjoy that wealth you're working so hard to build for even longer. And if you're around for even longer, you can then pass even more down. So that's what I'd probably end with.
I love that. I couldn't agree more. That's very much the vibe that I'm on. I want to get you to sign this book for me.
Yeah, no problem.
Pretty cool. This is why I interview all my mates, because I get them to sign my books. But yeah, everyone stop waiting, start investing.
Out now.
Out now.
Yeah, go and get it.
Go and get
Hope
it.
you enjoy it if you do get it.
Cheers. Thank you so much for coming on.
Cheers, Niaz.
Cheers, bro.
Legend.
Perfect.
Thanks, mate.
Thank you, man.